Lusternia, Age of Ascension presents Ask Estarra.
As you can see, I'm wearing my failing t-shirt for another episode of Ask Estarra. And we have a really cute person who has submitted some questions, so let's answer a few.
Hi, I play Solandra in Lusternia, and I'm submitting a video for Ask Estarra. My first question would be in regards to the histories. I was wondering if you had them all written beforehand, or if you had blueprints written up that you just fleshed out as you went along. I asked that because for things like Horacle and Mizrai and Jadis, new gods, I was wondering if you came up with them as the game developed, or if you always had plans to bring them in.
I did have an outline for the Elder Wars history, but Horacle, Kalakai, and some of the other gods written into the Elder Wars were indeed inspired by ephemerals who were brainstorming god concepts. Another example is Elantra the White, who was a goddess concept of an ephemeral who decided to go back into being immortal, but she's been written into the Elder Wars anyway.
I would like to know if you ever have plans to bring back Lady Asun, or Asun, I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. And if so, would she come back to Halifax due to her ties with Lady Trelilio?
I really can't answer that because I generally don't release any plans beforehand that may be coming up. However, if Asun were to come back, it would be because an ephemeral wants to take on that god role. That's all I can pretty much say about that. If you're interested in being Asun or being behind the scenes, we're going to have another ephemeral call probably after the Ascension event. So keep that in mind.
Not to say that we don't like Lord Elostian, because he is rather wonderful. Unless you say Elostian. That's actually a good question. I argue with people over this. Is it Elostian or Elostian? Because I know the shorthand is Elo, which, long vowel, but I usually do it with the short vowel.
The god whose name is spelled E-L-O-S-T-I-A-N is pronounced, now wait for it because it actually is pretty hard to pronounce. Okay, here it goes. George.
I will name him George, and I will hug him and pet him and squeeze him.
And here's something else I bet you didn't know. The city that is spelled H-A-L-L-I-F-A-X is pronounced jungle.
George, George, George of the jungle, strong as he can be. Watch out for that tree!
I was wondering if this is strange, but do troll lay eggs? Because in game this comes up a lot, and it's hard to tell exactly, and the joke is that they do.
Before you can answer whether any particular trill lays eggs or not, you have to answer this very important question. Do trills have nipples? Another question you have to answer is what effect does the human race have on the trill race? We know that humans can crossbreed with any race, and the results are that human characteristics get passed down among the various races. So I'll just leave it vague and suggest that players can roleplay it either way. A purebred trill may indeed lay eggs, while a trill with human ancestry, i.e. nipples, may not.
Lusternia is a very unique game, I think. I really like the sharding aspect of the races. I thought that was very unique. I haven't seen something like that elsewhere. So, but I'm sure coming up with the game, you have things added in that you didn't expect. So I guess I have a question of, what's the most interesting impromptu decision you've ever had to make in the game? What, I guess, surprised you the most?
That's a good question. Just before Lusternia opened back in 2004, we were rushing to finalize a lot of the aspects of Lusternia. And a lot of decisions made then were made under pressure and were last minute. A lot of the race names were very last minute. I know we took a lot of flack for the Tay-Day race, the name of the Tay-Day race, but I've ended up really liking that name. Let's see. I think the Bard Guilds were kind of an impromptu decision. The Bards were actually meant to be part of something else, and I just decided, let's make them their own class. And overall, I think they've worked out pretty well. There's some bumps in the roads, but I am pleased with the mechanics of the Bards. Now, if you're asking about impromptu decisions made because of players, I have made some unfortunate decisions during events because players went in directions we weren't quite expecting. Sometimes I think players are just trying to mess with our heads. But there's a lot of coding involved in events and a lot of pre-planning, and it's difficult to adjust events if players go in really strange directions. Some people think that free-form events where there's no plan and the admin should just adjust to the players is a good idea, but in my experience, because I've run some of those events or been around when some of those events are run, they almost never work out and they can be complete disasters. So there's some tricks to do to give players more options, but it still has to be pre-planned, pre-programmed, and have an outline. I'm getting off track here, but if you're interested on how those things are done behind the scenes, think about becoming an ephemeral, and calls are coming out later this month if you're interested in doing something like that.
I also would like to know if you have any regrets looking back at Lusternia since you started. If there's anything you would like to change, or perhaps you wish you'd done better. Family system comes to mind because people complain about that all the time, but I don't know if that means you do.
I don't like regrets because everything is a learning experience, and we wouldn't be what we are today if we didn't stumble along the way. I guess sometimes I wonder what it might have been like if we had more time before we opened in 2004 to maybe develop the histories more, or the races, or maybe some of the areas. But I don't really regret it. Those were exciting times, and I had a lot of fun opening up Lusternia. As for the family system, that was developed before we opened in response to, there was a MSN group. Maybe some of you really old timers will know this, but when they had MSN groups back then, there was a Lusternia MSN group prior to opening where I released some histories and discussed some things about Lusternia before it opened. And one of the things that came out of that was that players wanted a family system, and we had developed that, and I am generally pleased with how the family system works now. I know some people want it to be more flexible or more RP based, and of course there's room for an improvement. Unfortunately, it's a hard system to tweak code-wise. But that doesn't mean we're up to the challenge, and I would like you to stay tuned because we may have something coming up with the family system. Some small tweaks that I think people will like. I hope you'll like it.
Is there anything you wish you could bring into Lusternia but you haven't been able to see an outlet for yet?
I'm not sure if there's anything that I don't see an outlet for that I would like to see more of. I think we have a lot of outlets for a lot of aspects of playing, crafting, role-playing, player killing, conflicts. Some people may think there's too much of the player killing or the conflict system, but adding more outlets for that maybe something we'll see as time goes on, but I don't really see anything we need right now that we don't have. For myself, I like developing and opening new guilds, new cities and communes. I really like creating those and the stories that go on for those. We have one guild archetype that has never been released, which I'd like to see one day. I think players would enjoy it. Unfortunately, it's hard to justify new organizations like that until the player base grows. Obviously, we'll need more guilds in Gaudy Gooch and Halifax, or Jungle. But that will happen over time.
Is there anything that you are interested about from the player base that you wish people commented more on?
What's more comments we'd like to see on from the player base? Well, be careful what you wish for, because it can be very frustrating to get negative feedback. It can be helpful, but sometimes it's actually counterproductive. I guess I'd like to see more comments on what we do right. What you like about the gods, or the events, or the systems we have. Believe me, positive feedback inspires us more than anything else.
But thank you for the work you do in Lusternia and that the other admins put in. It's very much appreciated. And I think I'll just leave you with that. Thank you.
That's what I'm talking about. Positive feedback. Thank you so much. And wait a minute. There's someone else that wants to say something.
Leave Naren's reports alone. Leave them alone. You're lucky she even plays this stupid game. Leave Naren's envoy reports alone. CR talks about coding and fair buffs and nerfs, but he says that if Druidry needed buffs, they'd get them. Speaking of coding, when is it fair to ignore the needs of druids? Druids need buffs too.